I mean, do you have a favorite? I mean, was 13 your last, 12 your last year, or 13 your last year doing the Blitz?
2012 was my last year.
So that was the year last year. Ankeny was they were one football team together.
Yeah,
well, actually not.
No, it was probably 2011 because I had left in the summer of 2012. So it would have been the fall of 2011.
Really, really, because they.
Yeah.
That's crazy because.
Yeah. So I remember going to the Ankeny games when Joel Lanning led them to the state championship.
So
that was my first year that I was a fan.
Yeah.
So that was
the year they won it, and the last year where they were one unit. Yeah.
Yes, correct. So and you know, Dave, you know this better than anybody because you bring the coaches in. But to me, one of the great things about the show is just the personalities of the coaches, and you get to know them so well, and it's awesome. And I've gotten to know a lot of them through the years too. But just the fun differences in the personalities, you know, how they're all wired, and I just love like Jerry Bizzetti, you know, and I remember back when I was at Channel 8, I was doing a story on Matt Whitaker, you know, and he was our Best of the Preps. We did a Best of the Preps feature on a high school player. And so I'm doing a feature on Matt Whitaker. So I'm interviewing Jerry Bizzetti, and Jerry's the greatest guy in the world. He went to Drake, so did I. When I go out there, we'd always talk about bowling at Peggy's, playing that game with the puck, you know, and all that stuff. And we'd talk about all this other stuff. Then I'd turn the camera on, I'd say, okay, Jerry, tell me about Matt Whitaker. Well, he's 6'4", 210, and he can really run. And I'd think, well, shoot, I gotta phrase this another way. So I'd ask another question, and I'd get, well, he's 6'4", and he can really run, you know. And Jerry just wouldn't give you anything, right? He wouldn't give you anything. And then so, you know, we get done. I've worded the same question 15 different ways. He's given me the same answer 15 different times. I'm thinking I'll be able to put together a feature. It's all right. I put down the camera, and he goes, let me tell you about that Matt Whitaker kid. This kid is a leader. He's, you know, he goes on for 10 minutes about Matt Whitaker. It's like, Jerry, you know, if I just would have a hidden camera, I would have gotten the greatest interviews with him of all time. But he didn't like being on camera.
No,
but you got him to come in. And you got all those guys to come in, and that was so cool. And you always got the best out of the coaches. But I just love the different personalities, and that was so much fun too.
I think the coaches part. I want to thank you for a couple of things because I didn't really want to do that. You know, at the beginning, I didn't really want to do that. I just wanted to do the games.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to get coach reaction. You're like, no, let's bring a coach in. They'll give us credibility. I'm like, who the hell is going to come into the station? But talking to every one of those coaches, they were like, no, why wouldn't you promote your program?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it's not like Gary Swenson and those guys wanted to be on TV.
Right.
But they knew that it would be good for their kids, so they would come. They'd come after a loss.
Yeah. And that was hard. Because we'd schedule
them
in advance.
Just felt like crap.
And man, didn't you appreciate them when they still showed up?
Yeah.
You know, after a loss. Because it would have been easy to say, hey, Dave, I'm not going to make it.
That showed me something.
It showed me a lot.
Yeah. And I think that's
a lot of high character guys.
That's where I think my progression to become close with the Iowa Football Coach Association and all the coaches in there, it started because of that credibility, but also then you got to realize what Iowa high school football coaches were all about.
Yes.
And then you realized that network was really strong, and then you realized they just kind of held each other accountable. And it's like, even though maybe they didn't like our show, they're like, Bingham Walters, call you, just go do it.
Yeah.
You know, it'll be fine.
Yeah, I think you just had so much credibility with all those coaches because of the way you handled those interviews. And if they did get beat that day, you handled it gracefully, and you weren't, you know, you handled it in a great way, where those coaches felt comfortable and they were excited by the time they walked out of there about the next week's game, and you know they were going to bounce back and be fine. And we didn't always bring on the coaches that would win every week.
No.
We'd bring on coaches that might win 2 games in a year or whatever, and we'd hope that they won that week, you know?
Yeah. And give them some love.
Yeah, absolutely. But, gosh, so many fun memories from those interviews. And man, that was and then you eventually got to the point where you were doing stuff live in the stadium, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, which, you know, as technology advanced and we were able to do more things, we were able to make the show progress. Because when we started, you know, we didn't have any of the tools that they have today to be able to, like I mentioned, streaming and all that stuff. So it was just, like I said, we had the accelerator. But But you know, I think of the first time I pushed the window myself, like when I was working at Channel 8, I had just started there, and Ankeny played Roosevelt in a playoff game at Williams Stadium.
Okay.
And
Not bad.
It was a great game. Paul Rhodes, this is how old I am. Paul Rhodes was playing for Ankeny.
Holy
okay.
cow.
Roosevelt had a running back named Rod Edwards, who
Oh,
was
yeah.
about 5'8", just faster than heck, just a rocket, you know. And I think he went on to play at Drake, in fact. And but anyway, great game, back and forth. But I think most people would have felt it was a pretty big upset if Roosevelt pulled it off, even though they were the city champs. And they did. Roosevelt won the game. And their coach, Mike Zelenovich, had come from Chicago, from Proviso East. And I'd actually called some of his games at Proviso East High School because they played Glenbard West. I was doing the Glenbard West games for my high school.
This is crazy because his son just committed to Iowa. His grandson just committed to
It's
Iowa State.
The
Yeah,
circle
okay,
of life, the
okay.
circle of life, right? So Mike Zelenovich was the coach of Proviso East. In fact, he coached Tracy Henderson, who was one of the great Iowa State receivers ever at Proviso East.
What an athlete.
Great athlete. And so anyway, Mike had come to Des Moines, and was coaching at Roosevelt, and I knew that I was up against it, but like, man, it was such a great game, and we got the finish, and we went out, we just interviewed him on the field right there.
Really?
And
that would be awesome to see.
And this was like a lot, you know, it took a little longer to get your highlights together and all that, so we were really cutting it close. But I think it was Chuck Reed that was with me. The two of us, we interviewed Mike Zelenovich. His players picked him up, carried him off the field at the end of the interview, and we just bolted out of there down Grand Avenue. And but that was just kind of that rush that you got from, man, I'm going to push the envelope a little bit further because these kids are worth it. This game is great. And then when we got back, I remember Pete just loved that. You know, Pete Taylor, he just freaking loved the Mike Zelenovich interview at the end, and so it was really cool. But that's where
that resonated with you. The interview, getting the coach part on the credibility.
So I mean, and just like we talked about, just kind of, well, this game's too good. We can't pull ourselves away. I know we're going to be in real trouble when we get back to the office. And we were editing like banshees, and you know, putting our scripts in like there was no tomorrow, and people could just see the 40 minutes between when we return to the office and when we go on the air. You know, oh my gosh, it was total chaos, but we loved it.
You always, I think as I got older, you just kept in the same vein. There were times where I'd be back, I'd have my stuff edited, you know, and I'd be like, where in the hell are you? I was kind of actually worried about you.
Yeah.
And you'd come flying in there. And I didn't really need you to say anything. You'd have the thing, and you'd have a couple of earmarks, and you'd be like, all right, and then you'd have to, you know. And I don't know, was there something about that you put yourself in that position on purpose, or did you? Because you seemed to, even when we didn't have the Blitz, some nights I'd be like, are we going to get the show ready? And you're like, oh, okay. You know, did you like that little?
Probably at that age, yes. It wouldn't be really good for me now.
No.
But the adrenaline rush is part of the Friday Night Blitz.
Yeah.
It is a rush of adrenaline, the whole thing.
And I think it showed in the show, too, right? That's what you wanted it to be.
Exactly. From picking out the games to seeing if you could get from point A to point B to, you know, hoping that something actually happened in those games that you could highlight. And then that didn't always, you know, they didn't always cooperate on that, or the game would start late, or the weather was, I mean, there was so many extra factors that went into it, but it was always an adrenaline rush, and it was always so much fun. And then we get done with the show every week, and we just freaking, you know, we'd exhale. Because, I mean, it was such a nonstop thing that you didn't even have a chance to breathe.
I was always, after every show, we'd sit there for a while, and then I'd be like, that's a top 3 all time. You know, I'd be like, that's top 3 all time.
Yeah, you were ranking them. We had a lot of fun, and
if you had a good show, you'd be like, that's a top 10.
Well, we covered so many games. I mean, think about how many games we covered. You know, that you've covered. Oh my gosh, in 25 years. I mean, And
what's cool for me is I've done every game in the Dome since 2001 too, so that ups my. And as long as there's a game, I can shoot it.
Yes.
I mean, I can't get out and mow my yard and, you know, go out to dinner with my wife on a Friday, but if there's a game in the Dome,
you're there.
Just, I'm fine. Why is that?
So
No, go ahead.
Let me turn this on you. So who were your favorite players to cover?
Oh, wow.
Over 25 years. Who have been, or the favorite teams or players or personalities for you over that
Wow,
time?
I love Donnie Lincoln at Madrid. You know, when Randy Hinkle was, I liked Randy because he was good with this from the very beginning. He had a little ornery streak like you and the Johnsons, you know, and a Pete. And he was intelligent, and he would, as soon as he put that mic on, and I would hear him, he'd start making fun of me to his coach. He'd be like, "Hey, Bingham, you know, he didn't play. He was terrible. You know, he's living through us right now. You know." And so I loved it that Randy was able to get it. And then 5 minutes later, he's coaching the hell out of his kids.
Oh gosh, yes.
So I miss him tremendously, but I guess it's those relationships. We had Gary in here and Tom Wilson now that, you know, once he came into the area, those are all covering Brandon when we did that. Yeah. You played, you picked on me for the Pleasantville stuff, and I think all of us that are from a small town, even though we live in these suburbs, you know, we define ourselves, whether our hometown was good or bad, we're defined by our football team, and I think that's what Iowa is. I mean, even if you grew up, you know, maybe Sadell didn't always have the best football team, and you guys have had your Sadell stories, which are funny, but you know, if you're from Sadell, you're like, our football team, you know, but
it's fun when they did get good.
But when Brandon scored a touchdown against Carlisle, because you didn't really know. Part of the stuff was I never told you, and you never told me, and you'd be like, "Hey,
we didn't have time to tell each other."
and it wasn't like I needed you to say like, "Hey, when these Lincoln highlights come up, Binger, you're gonna have to pay attention," because we were paying attention to each other.
Oh gosh, yes.
But Brandon scored a touchdown, and I was like, "The baby bull," and you were like. You thought that was funny, and you were like, "The baby bull." I mean,
I love that.
So I think those were, you know, being able to cover my hometown.
Yeah.
But I think that's every night now. Like I'm going to Van Meter and Humboldt tonight. I'm jacked. I mean, you're talking Bob Feller, Frank Gotch.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking, you know, the
Ryan Hartlaw.
Oh my God. I mean, you dress, you know, your wrestling coaches from Humboldt, and I mean, you just want to. Dan Gable stayed all night there and on a recruiting trip, and then 9 months later they had a girl, I guess. I don't know. So I mean, so these are the things that tie us.
Yeah.
But I think the Lanning stuff really resonates now with me because of that 2012 Quincy Griffith. I loved the blitz. He loved the blitz extra. He was a lineman on the team. He's a grad assistant on the Iowa staff now. But my son-in-law he was the best player on the team, obviously. I mean, nobody knows who Drew Carlson is, but he was the best player on the team. Advanced Family Dentistry, if you need your work done there. But I look back on that. That was my daughter's senior year, you know, right around your daughter's era, too, with Kate and everything. She was gone by then. But, I mean.
Yeah, those are good memories.
Yeah, I think being able to do that. And it didn't matter. Like you were going to say, Joel Lanning, he's my neighbor. You said it on every highlight, every show.
Right.
You didn't.
Well, it became a shtick after a while. But you know, but it started out very organically because it was Jeff. It was Jeff Lanning. You know, his older brother.
Hey, he's my neighbor. And I'm like, Jeff is,
Yeah. And so I watched those kids grow
and then you
up
got
across
feedback.
the street, and they hit home runs into our gutter, you know, and we'd have to go get them the balls out of the gutter, and. But great family, Dana and Lisa.
Jeff was with Kate, wasn't they? Weren't they about the same, or was she a couple years younger than Jeff?
Yeah, Jeff's about Kate's age. Yeah. So Dana and Lisa, the parents, are just phenomenal. Yeah. Phenomenal people. And so when Jeff would do something in the highlights, and he was a running back and a linebacker, you know,
tough kid.
I just say Jeff Lanning, that's my neighbor, you know, and then you do the highlights, and you'd say Jeff Lanning, that's John's neighbor, you know, and so. Every time Jeff Lanning did something, I always said, that's my neighbor. Well, the Lannings love that, you know. And so when Joel came along and he was making plays left and right, I had to say, that's my neighbor for Joel, too. And so that kind of stuff was just the fun stuff that we did that just kind of added some flavor to it. But
you know, naming a location of like I would talk about Fizz and Carlisle or something like that.
Right, or we'd call the Caseys and get the scores.
Yeah. Wasn't it amazing though that you were always like, Banger, give them your card, your AD, and it's weird though.
That was the biggest challenge was getting the final scores.
But I thought, you know, compared to even now, I thought we nailed it. And we had Bree and Sharon, and we had a lot of people. And then when you brought Bree in. I don't know how many years she did it, but she figured out how to like get those scores.
She would call the Caseys, and that's what that was a skill in its own right. You know, you're sitting there, well, we don't. How in the world are we going to find out what
the new
final
Sharon,
score
North Mahaska, Linville Sully score?
Right, yeah. So somebody called the new Sharon Caseys to see if anybody's in there that was at the game. That's what we do. We'd call Caseys, and they'd answer the phone. We'd say, "Hey, can you ask if anybody was at the game?" Yeah, we got a kid right here that was. Ask them what the score was. They tell us the score. That's how we got the score. And so you had to be creative, but man, we had fun with it.
I mean, we could talk about a bunch of other stuff. I think, let me check my notes. I know that the Ed Thomas thing, too, you talked about going out and doing stuff live.
Yeah.
That was the big thing. I was like, hey, I know it's going to be hard, but I was, going and strong arm Ray Cole. I was like, Ray, but whatever, we can't. I go, we just need to take a SAT truck up week 1 to the Dyke New Hartford game. It's a road game. And then after that, we can figure out, the rest of it. And so really none of that really added up to anything until you were the one that called me. So, I mean, we have those weird moments that like where you and I are connected. You called me at home. You're like, hey, Ed's in a helicopter right now. So, but those were decisions that we made that were wonderful to go clear out of our way so that we could go up and cover something that was amazing Iowa history.
Well, you did an incredible job with that documentary, and it was one of the saddest moments of my life when I called you to tell you that Ed had been shot, and you had, as I recall, 2 or 3 days after that, you were scheduled to go up and show Ed the documentary you had done because the tornado had happened, and you said, I got to go cover every AP game. I got to go to every game, mic him up, and just basically show their whole season and just document it. And man, what a great decision that was after the tornado and the way that Ed helped the town recover. And we've all read the book, and Aaron's awesome, and Todd, the family's just awesome. And so, but you just went above and beyond when you did that. It was so cool. And then I remember the phone call and just the tears, and it was just awful. And I actually went out to the ESPYs to cover Aaron and the family getting the award for the way that they handled that situation, which was amazing.
How?
Incredibly. Aaron to stand up there at a podium and say that they're praying for both families.
Yeah.
I mean, it just.
Where did that come from?
Man, from Ed. Yeah, from Ed. You could see it. And so it was a very emotional time. It was very tough. But I remember distinctly you bringing the whole AP team down to the Fleur movie theater, and I went too, and we watched the documentary that you put together, and it was so well done, and just every part of it was great, and there wasn't a dry eye in the house, and man, it was just so cool. So that's the investment that you're making in high school football and how much you care about it, and how engaged we get in it, and that was the best illustration of it possible.
Well, I think that's Iowa, the football part of it, but it's weird how it just keeps knocking on the door. The Ed Thomas, the story, and it's not Ed as much as what the football communities and what's going on with the faith and what's going on in the small towns, and the thing that I don't want to lose. Ed's a symbol of that, but there's a lot of coaches that are doing it for teams that are terrible, for teams that are really good. Yeah. There are these people, and I'm a little bit afraid that we're losing it to a certain degree. But Brandon went and did those games when I had to do the Blitz stuff. But I think it's amazing that you remember that I was going to see him and Jan on that Thursday when you told me that. So it was strange, but Tom Rinaldi and Fox Sports doing a series on it now, and I think they're looking at the mental health part a little bit more and the Becker side of the family. Sure, and you bring that up. Tom asked me a question about, should we talk to the Becker? Should we talk to Mark? And I was just like, it threw me for a loop. I didn't have time to process it when he asked me about it. But yeah, for the sake of future people, maybe we need to look at that part. But how Aaron and Ed were able to.
And the Beckers were in Los Angeles for the ESPYs. I mean, just what a show of togetherness and the understanding that this wouldn't have happened if he was mentally right. And everybody understood that. And so there was a sympathy, there was an empathy, and football was sacred in that town, it still is. And when we went out to the ESPYs, we were on the red carpet, and Ray Cole was actually on the red carpet. Oh,
absolutely.
And he's running around.
Yeah, I'm gonna get Ray in here for this.
He's getting Aaron Campman and bringing him over. All the guys that played at AP, he brought them all over, and we got interviews with all of them. Then he got Brett Favre,
who wasn't doing interviews,
who was not doing interviews at the time because he was in a contract dispute, and he would not talk to any media. And Ray went over and begged him, said, "We're going to ask you one question about presenting the Ed Thomas.
Why, yeah.
You know, was it the Arthur Ashe? I think it was the
Yeah,
Arthur Ashe
yep.
Award for Courage to the Thomas family. He said, so we just want to ask you one question. And he came over and did it. And I thought, well, should I ask, hey, how's your contract coming along? But no, I asked the question, the legitimate question. And he gave a great answer. And it was a neat experience to be out there. But again, you know, that we talk about high school football and the highlights and the fun and the games. But what you just mentioned is so critical to what high school football is about, and that's the building the character of these young people and handling winning, handling losing.
Yeah.
Because you do have to handle both.
Yeah.
You know, you think, well, winning, no, everything's great. No, you got to learn how to handle winning. You got to learn how to handle losing. You got to learn how to handle injuries and teammates, you know, picking them up and building them up. You know, and there's so many life lessons, and that's what I think you and I have both loved about covering high school football around the state.
It's going to be interesting to see what some people, because I'll bring in some of the players too. Maybe I'll grab Joel. It's always interesting to see what other people think was, you know, they remember little quips and lines and things that we did that we don't remember anymore. So it'll be fun. It'll be fun to listen to some of the people talk about it. But the coaches we've talked to about it have always just said, no, it promoted our sport. But I'm gonna argue this for sure. I think it's a fact. I think the Friday Night Blitz with Dowling, you know, winning an the first year in 01, and then it's like 20 of the last 24 years the CIML teams won it. I think it had an impact.
Maybe
I
it might have. You know,
not intentionally. I mean, I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying it made.
There have been some great teams here in Central Iowa, and that we got to cover.
I mean, Dowling won 10 of those 20, so give them credit. But
yeah, and you know when you're talking about
but
credit,
Zelinovich has got 3 in a row. You talked about Zelinovich all the way back.
Well, that was Mike, the original. You know, and so. You know, I think one thing, you talk about credit, we got to give a ton of credit to Ray Cole.
Yeah.
Because he could have heard the idea.
He had to push back Kimmel, and he had to do, and
gosh, you know, I had to rearrange the programming
Nightline
schedule.
at the time, I think,
Nightline or whatever. And then he had to talk our news director, who it wasn't always easy to talk into those things, into, hey, every camera we got on Friday nights is going out to shoot high school football. We'll leave one behind in case there's some breaking news happens, but we're devoting as many cameras as we possibly can to doing this because we couldn't have done that. You know, like I said, you weren't getting streams. It was all your stuff. It was all organic. You had to go get it yourself.
Yeah.
And just that allowed us to do something like this. Never would have happened. And Ray's such a passionate sports guy. He just loves sports.
Well, and what was great about Ray is he allowed us to do that and all that, but he wasn't breathing down our necks.
No,
he never gave us.
He loved it.
Yeah,
he was
like, yeah, those guys are doing great. Let them go. Yeah,
he loved hanging.
We're having a great time in there. It's like the light beer from Miller commercial.
He loved it. He loved us hanging our hat on that because that is what we hung our hat on. We're going to cover high school sports.
We're outwork you. Nobody outworks us.
Nobody outworks us. Another one of our stupid things we don't say to each other.
Yeah, but it made us feel better.
Yeah, it did.
That was what are we at a Big 12 conference tournament or whatever. Nobody outworks us. Yeah.
The NC Kennedy stuff. Yeah.
What else? Can we just end it here? You got anything else? I mean, let me go through my notes real quick. I mean, we can always edit this. I just want to make sure that there wasn't anything that I forgot.
Okay.
And I don't really have any. I don't really have any notes. I think we talked about the sayings, the clothes, the coaches. We talked about Ed, Pete. Yeah, I think this was just an example of the last thing. So, and this is our relationship, and I think the relationship with all the sports guys in our market, which is great because, you know, Bailey and Roland and Chuck and Jeff, not all of them got to work. Chuck got to work on the Blitz with us.
Yeah.
But, you know, they wanted to, but they're great friends. But
yes, for sure.
One night is pretty common later on in your tenure. You come flying in and you're like, this game was great. Okay, here's the band guy in the band uniform at halftime. Here's the dog, and then there's the touchdown, the flea flicker. And I'm like, yeah. And you're handing me the sheet of paper, and I go in and I'm editing it, and just cranking it out and getting all the tapes back there, whatever needs to be done. And I think by the end of it, we were probably putting stuff on digital tape, or was everything going to a server by the time you left? Or
I think it was.
Yeah,
I think it was
big time. Yeah. You were.
That was just starting. That's why I had to get out.
Yeah,
it was getting too tricky for me.
It was getting dicey.
Yeah.
Developing situation. So I'm like, okay, this is cool, and I'm like, all right, I got the highlights done. I took this piece of paper and I put it in my pocket. I'm like doing the show, interview the coach afterwards. I'm just like, and I pull that sheet out, and it was your paycheck. So you know, on Fridays, we got a pay stub,
Yeah.
and you know, it was in an envelope, and so you would just went out and wrote your damn highlights on the back of your envelope. But because of like our friendship and all that, I mean, I didn't open it or anything. I probably should have looked at it and saw how much you were making back then, because we were getting paid so much by Ray Cole.
Yeah.
But that was just the funny part about it, is you would have probably been like, where the hell's my paycheck? And it wouldn't occur to you till maybe Saturday during the Iowa State game that you didn't even have it.
Yeah, there's just certain things you got to remember when you're running out the door, like tapes.
Batteries.
A pen is critical, something to write on. And probably that night I didn't really have anything else to write on, so I would have written on my hand if I had to. But you know, you do what you got to do.
And when you picked up your check, you're like, oh, I'll write on this, but I'll put it back in my pocket.
Sure.
I won't hand it to
Nobody else will
Binger.
learn it.
I'll be on time.
Yeah. No, we had fun, and you know, I think about just like covering not only the Valley Dowling games and you know the great rivalries and the great teams, but I remember covering Sadell North, you know, and Sadell. I got to tell a story. I'm on the Sadell sideline, and neither team had a big roster, right? They just didn't, you know. But they were both fighting, competing like crazy for a win. I think it's when North's long losing streak actually ended. They had lost like 66 in a row. But anyway, I'm on the Sadell sideline, and they get to fourth down, and the coach yells, "Punt team!" And one kid runs off, and one other kid runs out. It's like you couldn't have just said Jones, you know. It's like punt team. But
he was fired up like he was a big special teams coach.
But you gotta have as much fun and give those kids your commitment to coming and covering that game as you would a big game. And you had games occasionally on Thursday nights. I think that was one of them. So you could stay for almost the whole game.
Yeah.
I loved it, man. I wasn't going to just go get 2 highlights and leave.
Yeah.
I was going to stay.
Yeah.
And
you might get something funny.
It was just a great game. You know, just seeing these two teams that hadn't won a lot to compete like crazy and be happy for the one that finally got a win.
Nobody outworks us, and knowing where to be was a big deal. And that's something that, you know, you and I, we couldn't write it down, but we were like explain to people like
yes,
yeah. And then when we were at games together, we'd be like, look at where he is. He doesn't know. He doesn't know what he's doing.
And if you're shooting Madrid, you talked about Randy Hakel. You're shooting Madrid. They're going to do all this misdirection stuff in the backfield, and you're going to bite on one of those fakes.
Do not.
You know, you're like a linebacker. You got to have your eyes. And so the way
hold the camera.
The way to shoot a Madrid game was to get 50 yards downfield, just stay really wide, and just wait for somebody to emerge with a football, because that would happen, right? They'd get all these 70-yard touchdown runs, and it's like they're doing 17 different things in the backfield. Then boom, like shot out of a cannon. Here comes some, you know, 190-pound fullback with the ball, just trucking, and that's the only way you could shoot Madrid football. Otherwise, you'd get lost.
Yeah, you'd have to. I always found I had Hinkle figured out, so I would find the strongest pulling guard, and wherever their best guard went, then I just would slowly
go there.
Zoom in. But that was good stuff. Gosh, there was something else I was going to bring up, but I can't remember what it was. It'll probably pop in. Parker, you got anything for Walters? Nothing.
You guys, I like listening to the stories. I think the stories are enough.
We've only scratched the surface.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, that's okay. We don't want to bore people, but it's man, it's been fun reminiscing about that, because I got to tell you, Dave, I don't go to as many high school football games anymore.
I don't know if I could go to a game if I'm not on the sideline.
Yeah, it was fun when Joel was still playing, and my daughters when they cheerleaded. We'd go to those games, but I don't hardly ever go anymore to high school football games, and that's kind of a shame, because it was special, but. You're right. It's a different adrenaline rush from being on the field than being up in the stands, just being like every other fan, you know. But I miss it, and I do miss it, and I love the stories and the places we got to go and how I got to know this state, because I wouldn't. You know, somebody says to me, I'm from Sibley. I'll say, that's a suburb of Ocheyedan, you know, because I know every town by the consolidation of the schools.
Yeah, Ottawa, Arthur, Battle Creek, Ida Grove. Yeah, we've been over there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's up by Arthur. Yeah, exactly. So, but that was a great way to get to know the state, the people of the state. It's been awesome.
Well, and I think still, like, people always are projecting. Even back then, we were always projecting like, oh, what's he going to be in college, or where's he going to pro, and all that. And I've always been like, can we just enjoy? Because like Jason Scales, who was good at Iowa State, but I mean, to this day, you were talking about, I don't know if I saw a better high school football player. And that was like the second or third year of the Blitz. I don't know. And
Al Lazard
and,
was a great high school football player. Yeah, Todd Blythe was a great high school football. There were a lot of them. I mean, Tim Dwight, I mentioned earlier.
You got to see
I never went and covered his games.
No, but we saw him. Yeah,
I saw him at the state track meet, and that was one of the most incredible things I've ever seen in my life. But
especially for his size.
But we saw highlights of him in high school and how he was just dominating. And so there's been so many that we got the privilege of covering. Casey Blake is a high school quarterback, and goes on to a long career with the Dodgers.
Chris Street, Brandon Myers. I mean, you can go on. You can go on and on about.
It was so much fun. That's what I remember. I remember the players, and I don't have as many specific memories of a game and what the final score was and who won the state championship that year as I do just, the great players we got to cover. And
it'd be fun. You'd really have to sit down and, do the Bud Leg thing where you would and have Bob Selby go, okay, these are the ones you're forgetting.
Right.
And really think about it.
Southeast Polk, and Kyle Orton.
And just their run, with Wampa and Sama and those kids, Proctor. I mean, this has been kind of crazy, and you've got Moberly there now with Robbins, and now the other Zelenovich coming. It's like, what is going on?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, there's so many great players around this area, and so well coached. I mean, that's the thing that, you sit there, and from my perspective now, just covering college football mostly. But when I watch like the state championship game, and I see Southeast Polk and the way that they're lining up and they're, guys in motion, and, back when we first started covering it, it was, 3 yards in a cloud of dust, or maybe you break a tackle and it's 6 yards in a cloud of dust. But I remember we used to make fun. John Jenkins, the Newton coach, had heard of the forward pass, but never actually tried one in a game, and so, but now the sophistication of these high school offenses is incredible, and the defenses too. So great coaching going on around the state. I just love how it's progressed.
I liked how we made fun of Hinkle a lot, and he loved it that we made fun of him. He thought that was great.
Were you going to turn back in 70-yard touchdown runs? You said no, we have to have this be a 12-play, and they did plenty of those too, 12-play 70-yard drives. But usually it was just somebody busting out of the pack. But they were great coaches in their own right. They just did it a different way back then, but man, we got to see a lot of good players, a lot of good teams. It's been fun.
Well, and I thank you for making me bring those coaches in, because now they're some of my my best friends, and I'm still doing the high school stuff, and I hope to do it for the rest of my life. And we go in and mic them up, and they allow us to do that. The Football Coach Association always has. But I would not allow. I would tell them not to let anybody else ever do that. Ever.
Yeah. Well, you're getting so much. I mean, to get in the locker room.
I mean, it's not because they're doing anything bad. It's just if you don't have a emotionally mature person like putting the right stuff out. Yeah,
exactly.
One of those coaches says, "Let's go kick some ass," and they're like, "You can't say that." You
got to be careful. You do. You got to protect. But at the same time, the access that they gave you, the ability. Blitz Extra was. I enjoyed that even more than I enjoyed the Blitz. I love Blitz Extra, where you would go to a game and your brother and you guys would just shoot the heck out. And Selby's calling incredible play-by-play
from the sidelines
because that's tough calling play-by-play from the sidelines. You can't see everything develop down there. And
Selby's an innovator.
He was great calling those games, and so I love that show. I thought that was so cool. And but those coaches, to grant you that access, they weren't going to do that for just anybody. They had to know they could trust you and that you were going to handle that situation correctly. But think about how many people kind of got to see inside these high school programs, these towns, and it's awesome.
In a positive way. Yeah. All right, I better let you go. I know you got family stuff. Otherwise, we're going to be here for another 5 hours. That's a wrap on whatever this was.
All right.